Thanks to all of you for coming. My name is Jason Tondo, and as most of you already know, I teach in the American Studies and Interdisciplinary Studies program here at CCGA. And every year, I take a group of our students to the University of Florida conference on comics and graphic novels in Gainesville. This is a highly respected regional conference with a 13-year history. And every year, we are the only undergraduate panel there. It's always been a really exciting experience. We've had a lot of great feedback, and a lot of our students have really learned a lot about grad school and about their options and possibilities. It's a great opportunity for them to network with faculty members and grad students from all over. So this year, we're doing this again. And we have 3 speakers today who are giving you their presentation as a dress rehearsal for their conference presentation this coming weekend. The theme at Gainesville this year is International Comics. And so the work that you're about to hear is all on Japanese or French comics. And our speakers will, I'm going to let them sort of speak for themselves. We'll start off with Tiffany Hamilton, our first speaker, and then Christine, you want to go second? Christine Westall and Mr. Tyson will finish up. And we'll have, but my hunch is we probably won't have any extra time. We only have an hour, and your presentations are almost 20 minutes each, so we probably won't have any time at the end. But if we do, we'd be delighted to take questions and have some conversation at the end. For those of you who are students in my class and you're looking for the sign-up sheet, I think it's probably floating around down here for your vital extra credit points. Okay. And with that, I'll back off and let Ms. Hamilton take over.
In The Quest for the Time Bird, we have a story of fantasy and adventure starring a young girl, Police, and a reluctant knight, Bragan, who must come together to help save their world from the release of an evil god. From the opening page, we are made painfully aware of Police's gifts, her overly developed endowments that are just barely covered by some tattered cloth held on by a belt. From her wild red hair to her voluptuous curves, it is almost immediately clear what kind of heroine Police will be. From the very first panel to page 6, panel 2, we are shown Police in a seemingly objectified view. But what makes a fictional character objectified? Can she be dressed in such a provocative manner and still be empowered? How much does it really matter what she is or isn't wearing? By using Laura Mulvey's theory of male gaze, as well as Michael Foucault's theory of sexual power, and Tricia L. Crawshaw's ideas of objectification, I will examine the text and the context put forth by the creators to answer these questions. First, we must look at what objectification is and how it relates to a fictional subject. Objectification is defined as a person or persons seeing or treating another person as an object, a something instead of a someone. In this context, it would be the viewing of a female character as an object of male desire, instead of a well-developed character. In the real world, it comes down to power, or in other words, consent, that determines whether a woman is being objectified or empowered. In a fictional setting, who gets to make that assertion? According to Ronnie Ritchie and her witty and informative comic on the website Everyday Feminism, it is the creator's position to say whether the character is objectified or empowered by portraying them with or without power in a given situation. Therefore, we must look to the textual evidence in order to determine if a character is in fact being objectified. How is the creator of the subject portraying her with words and images in contrast to her male counterparts? One view of objectification comes from Tricia L. Crawshaw and her paper, Truth, Justice, Boobs, in which she looks not only at how the characters of graphic novels are objectified, but how the female comic book fan is objectified as well. She asks the question, does it empower the reader? She states that comic book creators are at the forefront of ideological manipulation. They are deciding how young women view the world and themselves. When there is constant sexualization of female characters, young female readers are left to conclude that their value in this world is based upon their physical bodies and their perfection or lack thereof. Based on looks alone, it would be fairly clear to the audience the position of Police in her fictional world. However, if we are to do a fair reading of the book, we must look closer at the clues given to us by her creators as to whether or not she is a sexually empowered feminine character or just another object of desire and fantasy for the male audience to devour. We certainly see hypersexualization of a female character. However, she is not the American stereotype of a female heroine. Elise has curves and wild, unruly hair. She is assertive, independent, and fierce. Not at all the usual heroine we see so often, with perfect hair and a tiny frame, whose powers pale in comparison to her male counterparts. In short, she is a different type of female heroine. She is a girl embracing her sexuality while maintaining a strong presence in her world. Elise is obviously drawn to appeal to the male readers, but is that all that matters? Can she not still be strong while looking at the part of an adolescent boy's fantasy? Or does the girl need some pants? Laura Mulvey, in her essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, brings forth the theory of the male gaze. Mulvey uses this theory in analyzing film. However, it very easily can be applied to comics and graphic novels as well. Male gaze is the concept of using the image of a woman to play to the male viewer's desires. It puts the male viewer in relation to the male protagonist of the story, to identify with him, to essentially become him. We are then given the images of the woman in the story, lingering shots of the more sexualized aspects of her figure, and their purpose in fulfilling the man's desires. Looking at this particular graphic novel, we can surely point out several instances of male gaze. Take, for example, page 6, panel 2 again. We are staring at the backside of our heroine, with her dress conveniently flowing to show a hint of what is underneath. Upon closer examination, we realize that we have not yet met any male viewers with which to identify. So is it still within the realm of male gaze? According to Mulvey, her theory places the woman in the position of exhibitionist. She is there simply for male viewing pleasure. The female character in a male gaze-dominated story serves two functions: erotic object for the characters and for the spectator. Therefore, this particular scene does fit into the male gaze theory. She may not be actively viewed by a male character, but she is viewed by the male spectators or readers. The opening page shows a young girl, maybe 16 or 17, just coming into her own and ready to take on the adventure laid before her by her mother. Page 10, panel 5, is the first instance which shows us what kind of girl this Elise really is. Brave, feisty, and skilled with the whip. As the story develops, other than her wardrobe, she seems to be in control. She defeats a wild beast and impresses the male characters of the story with her skill. Or is it something else that impresses them? Page 12, panels 1 through 3, show a dumbfounded guy, unable to move or speak because of Police's assets. Considering that Police is not in fact in these panels, and is therefore not directly confronted by this particular male character in his gaze, it is determined that she is not yet objectified by it. The male gaze does not work for this particular scene, as we are not gazing on the subject of said gaze. It isn't until page 20, panels 1 through 3, that we begin to really see Police's physical attributes come into play. In hugging the injured Tourette, she is placed in a position of objectification when she pulls him in close to her chest, and he makes it clear that he likes what he sees. But rather than submitting to Tourette's desire, she pushes against it and him. In this way, we see the creator continuing to give Police power over her own body. Later on the same page, panels 7 and 8, Bragan attempts to exert power by telling Police that she should go back to the farm, that he doesn't need any distractions getting in his way. Police, of course, ignores his command and continues on the journey. Throughout the first volume of the book, Police asserts herself as independent and strong, and able to stand her ground against Bragan, despite her sexualized appearance. Foucault discusses his views on sexual power in his essay, Method, in terms of the multiplicity of force relations immanent in the sphere in which they operate and which constitute their own organization. In other words, power is seen as something that is relative to the subjects being defined by it. Foucault claims that power cannot be lost or held, but rather exercised by those in relation to one another within groups and society. As he states, there is no power that is exercised without a series of aims and objectives, and Police is seen to use her power to gain what is necessary at any given moment throughout the story. For example, in the scenes in which Police is seen as an object of sexual desire by a group of creatures referred to as the Grey Gellets, she is first shown as powerless against a mob of male creatures who are provoked by her sexual appearance and who, as their leader states, cannot help themselves. Then, on page 47, panel 2, Police takes her sexual power back in the pursuit of saving her male counterparts by flashing these same characters and posing herself as the distraction. While one could argue that this puts her in an objectified position, if we look back at Foucault's perceptions of power, Police is exercising her sexual power in this situation, which thus determines that she as a character in a fictional world is empowered. Police is the one who chose to use her body in this way. She was not coerced or forced into that decision. Throughout the book, she is shown to continuously push Bragan's buttons, calling him jealous, and at times implying that he is not as brave as he once was. In this way, she also takes power from the male protagonist by eliciting in him a response that undermines his own power. Police shows us her willingness to fight alongside her male counterparts. In panel 3 on page 73, and panels 2 and 3 on page 75, as well as her likeness to that of Bragan on page 77, panel 6, which gives her character a stronger sense of power and thus empowerment. So far it seems that Police is not your typical objectified girl in a barely there dress. We do see an instance of male gaze on page 78, panel 6, when the masked stranger is shown getting a glimpse of Police's backside as she speaks of being stuck. In this instance, she is shown as objectified on two levels. On the one hand is the simple fact that she is being looked at from a sexual viewpoint without the ability to say anything about it. And on the other hand is the fact that she is put in a typical female role of nurturer or caretaker against her own desire. In volume 3, we get to see her use her sexual power once again to get what she wants. Page 111 shows her enticing the masked stranger with the very thing he can't seem to get enough of throughout the book, her body. Is this an example of objectification or empowerment? It is her sexual appeal which is used to convince the masked stranger to continue on the journey. But she is the one wielding the power by choosing to use her sexuality in this way. Though the creator of the book ultimately gives her the power in the way she is portrayed when she purposely chooses how to use her body. Further into this volume, we see Bragan take control in a more forceful manner for the first time when he slaps Police after being tested by her one too many times. It would seem that Bragan has finally had enough of Police's incessant nagging and puts a stop to it on page 120. But on the very next page, Bragan realizes his mistake and immediately tries to make amends. But Police isn't having it. This isn't a girl who forgives and forgets just like that. She even goes so far as to call him cowardly a few pages later, thus showing us in Bragan her power and forcible nature once again. In the final chapter of the book, volume 4 begins to show a very different aspect of Police. We first see a strange occurrence on page 175, panels 1 through 4, as they encounter the guardian of the Time Bird, who for some reason seems to be oblivious to Police, but not her strange blue creature. She begins to show an unrelenting power, as well as a consuming desire to get the object they've been on the quest to find throughout the story. Police seems to be possessed as she risks her own life and that of her fellow travelers when she rushes into the nest of swarming birds in an outrage against the new female character of the story, whom she, for reasons unknown, doesn't trust. Is there in fact a reason for her mistrust? Is she merely jealous at the loss of her masked stranger to this kiss guild, the loss of her power over him? Throughout the remainder of the story, we cease to see the playful nature of Police and begin to see something much darker as she becomes obsessed with the task at hand. Is this the creator's way of breaking down Police that was built up in the beginnings of the story? Are we seeing a more objectified character as she loses her power over the masked stranger to another woman? By page 211, things begin to come clear. Panel 7 begins to explain the mysterious beliefs as told by Mara, her mother. We come to find out that she was merely an illusion, a blending of Mara's and Bragan's personalities cleverly crafted by Mara to persuade him in embarking on this quest. Police is left a shell, no longer with any power at all. What then can we make of her as a character, whether objectified or empowered after this knowledge? If she was never real to begin with, how can she have had any power at all? As it turns out, Police in fact had two creators, that of the writer of the book and that of Mara. Looking within the context of the text, Police is seen to be given power in almost all of the story by both her real and fictional creators, which would, by my research, imply that she is still in fact an empowered female character. Police is given the consent, the power, time and time again, by taking her sexuality into her own hands, by being able to stand her ground against Bragan and other male characters, by being shown to resist an unwanted sexual advancement by others in the book. In conclusion, it would in fact appear that a sexualized female character can be empowered, so long as she is portrayed in that manner, all in spite of her lack of pants.
My name is Christine, and I'm going to be talking about a horror manga from Japan called Tommy. And I think first of all, it's really important to point out that in comics, there's always been an issue when it comes to the portrayal of women. Although half of the readers of comic books are women, the audience that writers usually tend to cater for are those that are male. This leads to a strong male gaze, since the work is usually based around male fantasy. Most of the time when you're reading a comic book, you're actually reading the fantasy of a man. Specifically, there's a rise of violence when examining the genre of manga from Japan. In manga, we rarely see female characters that do not go through some sort of suffering. When you close in on the specific genre of horror, you get male fantasies involving the murder of women. Specifically, I'll be talking about Tommy by Junji Ito. Tommy is a manga about a girl you do not want to take home to meet your family for Christmas. First published in 1987, Tommy tells the story of a monster that takes the form of a very beautiful and charming young girl. This beauty has the ability to not only make any man who sees her instantly fall head over heels in love with her, but it impacts their mind as well. These men tend to go insane when they meet Tommy. They attack her in fits of violent rage or jealousy, and they tend to chop her to bits. Each of these bits becomes a new seed for a new Tommy to grow and take its place. This continues happening throughout the story. The story begins with Tommy already being dead. Her brutal murder is the headline on the television and the talk of the city. She was cut into tiny pieces and the remains were spread all around town. While not all of her body parts were found, there was enough to determine that it was in fact Tommy thanks to dental records. As the students in her class speak about how unbelievable it is that she's gone, panic ensures when she actually walks into the classroom, apologizing for being late and acting as if nothing ever happened. This kind of scares everyone. They wonder if she's in fact a ghost or a zombie, stating that if she's a zombie, then she's a pretty cute one. Apparently, Tommy had been sleeping with her teacher and fallen in love with him. When he tried to leave her, she told him that she was pregnant and attempted to blackmail him by claiming that she would tell everyone about them if he did not agree to marry her upon graduation. Later, on a field trip to the mountains, a boy who has a crush on Tommy happens upon her with the teacher. He flips out, and in an argument, Tommy eventually falls off of a cliff. The teacher then sends all of the female students away, and he and the male students proceed to hacksaw her body into tiny pieces. When they begin to cut her up, they discover that she's not all the way dead, and they have to continue with this violent murder. A fitting quote that describes this comes from the book Permitted and Prohibited Desires, Mothers, Comics, and Censorship in Japan by Anne Allison. While talking about this issue, she states that women are beaten time and time again into submission, but they always return, or if one woman is eliminated, another takes her place. This is true to the story because Tommy is in fact beaten and even murdered time and time again, only to return to take the place of the murdered Tommy. This quite literally makes Tommy a visual representation of the treatment of women in Japanese manga. To understand the way in which Tommy depicts the typical female protagonist in the manga genre, we have to understand that manga is usually a male fantasy visualized on paper. For example, take a more popular manga such as Naruto or One Piece. These can be analyzed to represent the male fantasy of adventure and rising above issues placed by society, since both main characters had a rough starting out. Japan itself is oftentimes criticized for its treatment of women, not only in media but in society as a whole. Women in Japan could not vote until the late 1940s, and contraceptives such as birth control pills were illegal until about 17 years ago. So this is a country with a negative view on women. A view so negative that the United Nations attempted to convince Japan to ban manga and other media that includes sexual violence against women, as they believed that this huge amount of negative treatment was causing the attitude that was directed towards the Japanese women. Hating women seems to sell. In his book, An Introduction to Japanese Society, Yoshio Sugimoto states that violence and sex are the very backbones of manga, creating both the strength and the weakness. He goes on to examine that such real aspects of life like sex and violence make the story more realistic and sophisticated, therefore increasing profit due to being relevant to all age groups. On the other hand, because of profits increasing, the demands have caused the sexual violence in particular to soar at an alarming rate. He states that this is dangerous due to the violence against women and young girls not only being normalized but promoted. Violence has basically become a badge of masculinity. Normalizing this paints the violent male as the social norm. For example, going back to the murder at the beginning of the story, why is it that the teacher sends the female students home, while he and the male students cut up Tommy's body? Why did they even cut up the body? Would it not have been enough just to leave her body there? They could have claimed it was an accident. No. They needed the power over her. The man needed to take his rage out on her to assert dominance, because when Tommy blackmailed him, she was gaining control, and a woman in control needs to be punished. Why is Tommy bad? Is it because she's beautiful? Hardly. She's evil because she's unobtainable. It's fine for women to be beautiful in society, but the second she's not available to men to consume, she's suddenly a villain. She sometimes is seen laughing at men or saying that they're not worthy of her. She tells men that she has a choice in the matter. A woman saying she has a choice being villainous. It seems pretty legit when you look at society today, as well as back when the manga was first published. This is intentional. The villain of the story, the monster, is saying things that women say all the time. She's saying that she should have a choice with who she's with. She's saying that her body belongs to her. Tommy never does anything that's completely evil. She merely exists, and that is why she's evil. When she dies and comes back, this can resemble the fact that one woman will never be the final victim. There's an archetype known as the evil Eve, and this almost perfectly matches Tommy. It's based on the first book of the Bible and holds the belief that all women by nature are naive, disobedient, seductive, easy to tempt, untrustworthy, evil, deceitful, and motivated by self-interest. Women can't be trusted, apparently. Her narcissism will bring men sorrow, and she's more obsessed with herself than any man. This is starting to sound a lot like Tommy. Tommy is all of these things, a true representation of each negative feature that a woman can have as warned by the Bible itself. Tommy is very manipulative. In the second and third chapters, she's able to manipulate a man into hurting someone who got on her bad side. When she's finished with said man, she tells him to go far away, resulting in him throwing himself off of the building because he can't be with her. This really matches up with the whole narcissism will bring men sorrow part of the description, because she only cares about herself. Julia Kristeva, a French philosopher, speaks of the horror genre as having a constant fear of the object. We fear the object because it's something that disgusts us, yet something from us or which we come. This means that as we are brought up, we are told that specific things are bad. In the horror genre, the female body is a form of the object. People are brought up with the sense that female bodies are worthy of shame and should be concealed due to this. That is why when you see a woman that is not covered up, she's oftentimes looked down upon. It's also why in horror comics and film, the promiscuous woman is oftentimes killed very quickly, oftentimes when she's engaging in sexual acts. Sex is considered to be a masculine trait because it's a form of power over someone. And if a woman tries to take control of this power, she'll instantly be punished for trying, such as Tommy was in the beginning of the book. Her sexual freedom is not within gender norms, and the male-led society does not accept it. The monster of Tommy is therefore the personification of fear that the female body and the nature of it. When speaking of female monsters in media, Shelley Stamp Lindsay states that it's not about liberation from sexual oppression, but about the failure of repression to contain the monstrous feminine. We are not supposed to identify with Tommy. We're actually supposed to fear her, her abilities, and her destructive potential. This is meant to shadow what happens when a woman has power over a man. The man just can't handle it. Laura Mulvey coined the term male gaze when she stated that women in media only exist to be looked at by the man. Women are degraded of their humanity as seen in Tommy. When women read horror comics, they see a distorted version of themselves on the paper. The monster that is Tommy is therefore the very example of this, as it mirrors the very aspect that male-led societies hold upon women. A woman's gaze is threatening to male power. Tommy does not seem to enjoy the power she has over men. In conclusion, the manga Tommy is a representation of how women are seen in comics, particularly horror manga as seen in Japan. Tommy is a literal portrayal of how men view women and the male gaze as a lens into male fantasy. Tommy has all of the properties of the women that men do not like, and it is the men disliking her that makes her a villain.
My name is Ross Tyson. I call it Big and Twisted, which is a very bad pun. It's about giants and spirals. But it's the use of dread, the uncanny, and isolation in manga to create horror. We've all felt it, a sense of unease that something just isn't quite right. Something happens, whether it will be stress, some sudden accident that causes the feeling to grow and grow until it becomes an ominous cloud that covers everything you do. You may find brief distraction or respite, but it's always there, right in the back of your brain, the dread. What causes this feeling of dread in the back of our minds? Is it simply that we can sense something is off, or is it our own nature warning us of the danger lurking around every corner? In Japanese culture, the sense of dread is usually characterized by a feeling of not being able to escape. The two best examples found in manga were Uzumaki by Junji Ito and Attack on Titan by Hajime Isayama. Both manga feature a story of characters trapped in their respective cities, one by a supernatural curse, and the other by terrifying creatures that lurk outside the city walls. We'll discuss how this feeling of dread is built and how isolation is made in both of these stories, and just analyze how the horror actually affects the characters. Uzumaki, which, if you don't know, means spiral in Japanese, is the story of a town cursed by the spiral shape. It draws its influence a lot from the works of both Alfred Hitchcock and H.P. Lovecraft, in that it's a very dizzying story. It honestly causes a huge sense of vertigo in the audience. And from H.P. Lovecraft, and the fact that we don't know what's causing it. We don't know where the spiral is coming from. Our protagonist, Kiri, lives and goes to school in this town and is a typical Japanese teenager. She has a loving family and a boyfriend who goes to school in the next town over. Her boyfriend, Shuichi, is the first to notice the town's strange obsession with the spiral, as he is gone most of the time and can see that something is different every time that he comes home. In fact, his family is the first to be affected, as his father starts obsessing over the spiral shape and becoming absolutely insane. This slowly starts building the audience's sense of dread, so we have no clue why this town is being taken over by such an innocent shape. The dread builds to its first critical point in the death of Shuichi's father. After obsessing over the spiral in every way possible, he finally took it to the ultimate level by packing himself into a circular suitcase in the spiral shape, breaking all of his bones and killing himself in the process. When his funeral is held, he is cremated and his ashes rise into a cloud of a spiral shape and fall into a small pond in the center of town. This first instance is just the starting point of the spiral curse, as it will soon consume every aspect of life in the town. We as an audience at this point are in the same shoes as Kiri. We have no clue what is going on or why the spiral is taking over. The uncanny effect intended by the author is that we are becoming mesmerized as an audience by the mystery of the spiral, practically hypnotized and feeling a sense of dread as we try to make our way to the center of what is happening. The sense of unknowing doesn't let up. As the spiral continues to take over, first Shuichi's mother, hospitalized with grief over the death of her husband, develops a phobia of the pattern. She goes to extreme lengths to rid herself of the spirals, cutting off her hair so it won't curl, and cutting off her fingertips in order to not have any spirals on her body. It all comes to a head whenever she takes a pair of scissors and stabs them into her ear to get rid of the cochlea inside of her, which is in a spiral pattern. This causes her to lose her whole sense of balance, and she falls into an unending sense of vertigo. She eventually dies and is cremated in the same manner as her husband, ashes spiraling into the sky and eventually coming to rest in the pond. The feeling of dread here seems to be almost at a breaking point, as we've seen 2 characters die already and it's only the 2nd chapter. However, it continues to build up more and more dread and uncertainty by thrusting the audience, seeing the story through Kiri's eyes, directly into the center of the spiral. Those closest to her begin to become infected, as her father obsesses over making spiral-themed pottery. One of her best friends begins to develop a spiral in her forehead that eventually engulfs her entire being. The curse soon enough finds its way to Kiri herself. Her hair begins to grow and curl, mesmerizing everyone around her and draining her energy, until she is too weak to move. She attempts to save herself by cutting it off, but every time she tries, her hair takes on a mind of its own and begins to choke her to death until she stops. She is finally saved by her boyfriend as he is engulfed in her hair while trying to save her and cuts his way out. He literally gets into the center of the spiral in order to save her and somehow finds his way out. But the sense of dread and foreboding has made its way into us as an audience and has not let up. We simply have no idea what is going on, and neither does the protagonist. We are all kept in the dark as the story goes on, until eventually Kiri and Shuichi decide that their only option is to escape the town, and that there is no way to break the spiral. However, every attempt at escape leads them right back to the center of town, in the same spiraling pattern that has been taking over. They realize that the curse is forever, going on in an infinite loop, and they lay down to accept their deaths. As their bodies twist together, the audience sees that the dread is inescapable and will happen with every new town that is built on the area and all the new people that come through. Although Uzumaki focused on more of a supernatural dread and an invisible force keeping the characters isolated and in a sense of hopelessness, Attack on Titan has a physical threat that can be seen and focuses more on an existential type of dread that its characters feel in the face of an enemy that could kill them at any time. Attack on Titan opens with the main character, Eren Yeager, and his adopted sister Mikasa going back home. It's explained that humanity is living in a large walled-off city in order to stay away from large beings called Titans. These Titans are giants that range from anywhere from 9 to 15 meters in documented height. It is discussed that there are 3 branches of military, the Survey Corps, military police, and regular regiment, and that these are their only means of defense against the Titans. From the start, a sense of dread is set up as humanity is on its last legs, forced to live like a caged animal hiding from predators that can devour them at any time. That time, as it happens in the story, is on this day. Eren's father leaves his family to go on a trip, and as Eren and Mikasa are out in the town, Titan the likes of which has never been seen appears outside the main wall. This one is skinless, showing nothing but bone and muscle, and towers over the outside wall. It proceeds to kick a hole in the bottom of the wall, and other Titans begin to pour in and wreck the outer city. Before we get to what happens when the Titans break in, let's talk about the Titans themselves for a moment. The Titans are the primary source of dread and hopelessness in the series. Towering beings, and they look for the most part like normal people. However, they are large, naked beings with no distinguishing features on their body except their faces. The faces of the Titans is what gives the most fear. Izuyama, in creating these creatures with an unending hunger and terror, used the most uncanny way of portraying the Titans, as they have the most terrifying facial expressions of usually bliss, sometimes terror, and sometimes ridiculous, overstated joy. One that plays an important role in developing Eren's character is an overstated smile, much like the court jester or the Joker of Batman. These depictions of emotionless, remorseless killers that eat their prey only serve to cause a sense of unease in the audience and protagonists, as the Titans can never be seen to show any sort of emotion when it comes to devouring their victims. Continuing on the assault of the city, Titans begin pouring in and destroying everything they come across. Aaron and Mikasa make their way back to their home, only to find Aaron's mother under the wreckage of their house, her legs crushed, and a Titan looming towards them. Unable to free their mother, they are forced to run away as she is picked up by the Titan and has her head bitten off right in front of them. We feel their horror as they try to escape the city, and it creates the biggest sense of hopelessness in us as an audience. They finally make it through. Safely in a boat, they make it into the next city, where they are forced into refugee camps, and they have to watch others starve due to negligence and lack of food. In the camp, the viewer feels a great sense of hopelessness and dread, much like the protagonist, due to the uncertainty of what the future would hold, and the continuing sense of loss after they have seen their mother and the city they lived in taken right before their eyes. Although there's a feeling of hopelessness, it only strengthens Aaron's resolve, as he vows to join the military and kill every last Titan in the world. Joining him in his objective is Mikasa and also their best friend Armin, who becomes a master strategist. The series then jumps forward 5 years as they make their way through training and quickly become cadets in the main military regiment. This is when the next big attack comes, as they're on watch atop the main outer wall. The colossal Titan once more appears as it had done 5 years earlier. It quickly kicks the wall in, and basically history repeats itself. Titans pour inside, but this time they decide they will fight. They will not simply stand by and let their home be taken from them. They fight, they die, and we see many of the protagonist characters that we grew to know during the training segment of the manga, as they had their own personalities fleshed out, their motivations for joining the military given, and their personal stories explained, be quickly crushed and taken away from the fight. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's during the battle that we follow Eren, Armin, and Mikasa, as they are all separated and forced to fight their way back to each other. Eren attempts to take down the colossal Titan after it appears, but fails as it suddenly disappears again. Armin, who is more of a skilled strategist than fighter, is probably the most hopeless in this fight, as he hides for most of the time, fearing for his life. Mikasa fares the best out of all of them, with her skills helping her to kill Titans with ease, as she helps many of her comrades makes her way back to Eren in order to protect him from rushing headstrong into something that will kill him. While all this is going on, the audience gets their biggest shock yet. As Eren is swinging through the city, he finds Armin under attack by a Titan. He goes in to save his friend, and in the process has his leg bitten off. As the Titan makes its way towards Armin, Eren heroically flings himself into the Titan's gaping mouth, holding it open, and telling Armin to run as he attempts to escape. We see this through Armin's eyes as the Titan finally crunches down, killing our hero before our very eyes. We feel Armin's dread as he runs away, realizing that he is the reason that his friend is dead, and that if he hadn't been so scared and overwhelmed by the hopelessness of their lives, that Eren would still be alive. He soon meets up with Mikasa, who upon learning of her brother's death, collapses in grief and loses her will to live. A Titan begins walking towards her, seeing her as an easy meal, and it looks as though she will soon be eaten. At the last moment, however, a larger Titan comes out of nowhere and begins to fight the one that's going towards Mikasa. This Titan is large with a hooked nose and cheeks cut open to show all of his teeth in a jagged, chaotic smile. Sorry. He proceeds to fight every other Titan that he comes across, killing each and every one by ripping them apart at the neck. Mikasa, observing the large, seemingly friendly Titan, realizes through watching its fighting style that the Titan is Eren. At this point, we pick up where we last saw Eren, his arm and leg lost to the Titan that swallowed him, in the pit of its stomach surrounded by dead and dying bodies, slowly boiling to death in the blood of his friends. As far as hopelessness goes, the audience is pretty deep in despair right now. Sorry, this pollen's got me. However, he soon remembers his promise to get revenge and kill every Titan in the world. He proceeds to get more and more angry as we see him begin to transform, leading to seeing the Titan that swallowed him have an arm burst out of its mouth. as Eren in Titan form breaks out and begins to fight back and retake the city. While this gives us a brief respite, a moment of hope in an otherwise dreary and hopeless world, it doesn't last long. He is soon brought in by the military police, who for obvious reasons do not trust his ability to turn into a Titan. However, oh goodness. However, he is soon able to convince them that he is on their side, with some help from Captain Levi of the Survey Corps. Oh my god.
Thank you so much.
This pollen is awful. He is brought in by Captain Levi of the Survey Corps, who promises to kill Eren if he ever gets out of hand. After all this, Eren and his friends finally graduate from the rank of cadet and are able to choose the branch of the military they want to go into. They all decide on Survey Corps and hope to bring more land back to the humans. One day, while they are out in the field, another obstacle comes running their way. A large, female-looking Titan comes in and proceeds to lay waste to most of the Survey Corps. The manga gives us the full horror of what is going on as we see soldiers being slaughtered by the Titan. She is swatting away soldiers that are trying to fight her and crushing others under her feet. The whole horror of war is seen in blood spattering everywhere, and the dying screams of soldiers as they are crushed to death. One is caught by the wire of his movement gear, and the Titan starts quickly swinging him around so fast that his body simply turns to mush from the force. This instills the sense of dread in both the other soldiers and the audience, as we see just what this Titan can do, as it seems to be a trained fighter and capable of actual thought, unlike the others we have seen so far. After much loss, our heroes somehow survive this ordeal, but not after Eren is beaten down within an inch of his life. They are taken back to the city and given some time to recover. In the meantime, they think of a plan, and through some analysis, think they know who the female Titan is. They lay a trap and finally realize that it is one of their fellow soldiers, a girl named Annie, who graduated with them. She is finally captured after a brutal battle with Eren in Titan form, in which she finally encased herself in crystal and is locked up far below the city. While this seems to take away a large threat, the audience gets one of our biggest shocks and one of the greatest horrors is unveiled. We see a wall that was damaged during the fight between Eren and Annie, and as a couple of bricks fall from the wall, we see an eye gazing through. The crack in the wall grows bigger until we finally see it, Titans. The wall is filled with Titans, all sealed into the brick and mortar around the city. While both manga build up senses of dread, they do it in different ways and to different varying effects. Uzumaki and Attack on Titan both prey on humanity's feelings of isolation and keep the feeling of dread built up to a near breaking point through the entirety of their publications. While Uzumaki is finished as a series, and we see that the feeling of dread and hopelessness was inescapable for Shuichi and Kiri, Attack on Titan is still ongoing, and we have yet to find out if there will be a happier ending, or if it will end just as hopeless as it began. These feelings of dread that are left after reading these series can be overwhelming, and it stands as a tribute to just how great the authors are for instilling this great fear into our hearts through their words and images.
Thanks, sir.